You might lose your body out there in the world, but if you stay here, you lose your soul. The same applies if you're a chronic overthinker. You reconsider your actions, you evaluate with yourself before you've even done something, and then you sit there in inaction, convincing yourself that it's not worth doing the thing that you want to do. What's stopping us overthinkers from achieving the things we want is action. If you're a chronic overthinker or somebody with social anxiety, you probably hate how much nonsense your brain generates, you're disgusted with yourself or even coming up with those excuses. You're aware of how many opportunities you've missed. You're afraid that one day when you're needed, when it calls for it, when it all comes down to it, you're too afraid to take action. Pragmatically, you can argue how thinking before you act is a good thing. Give yourself some time before you make a difficult decision. It's safer, stops us from making stupid mistakes. But many of us know that we cling on to that notion tightly so that we can use it as an excuse for inaction. And even though we're aware of that, in the moment itself, we don't know whether it is better to act before we think or really evaluate and properly consider whether we should do something and take our time with it and really consider all the different facets that the situation could call for. For many of us overthinkers, inaction takes away from the depth of our character. How many times do you have a good intention or something you want to do for another person or something you want to express to another person, or had an opportunity right in front of you, given to you, that you could choose to take, but because you had to consider all the little facets, you decide to either wait too long or let it go entirely. For example, in a social situation, maybe we want to give somebody a compliment, or maybe we want to disagree with their point of view so we can have a more in-depth conversation, or maybe you want to offer your help to somebody or comfort them in some way, but you're too afraid to do it because you could be overstepping your boundaries. Your brain starts to generate all sorts of nonsense like, oh, what if they think I'm looking down on them? What if this ruins my relationship with them? What if they think negatively of me? What if they explode emotionally? Maybe it's just safer if I don't do anything. And what happens is, even with the best intentions, everybody would think you have a personality of a plank. And even doing nothing sometimes is the worst thing to do. Just because you could think your company would become a hindrance to that person, it might be what that person is looking for and needs. And something that takes you so little effort to do, that would help them tremendously, is taken away by your own prejudices of how you could appear. And doing something that would take so little effort for you and do so much for them, you might have convinced yourself not to do because you're afraid of becoming a hindrance, because you've considered all the different realms and possibilities of how negatively you could impact that person, even though all you really wanted to do was show that you care. Thinking too much before you act leads to a loss of identity, a loss of opportunity. So let's talk about how we can deal with this. To find out whether a habitual thought that comes up right before you're about to do something scary is an excuse or valid consideration, is to deliberately write and think about it. And from there, with a clear head, we evaluate whether that thought is worth having or not. Let's say you're struggling with social anxiety because of your chronic overthinking. Before you speak to somebody that seems like they're busy, you second guess yourself and then you stop yourself, and then you sit there and you tell yourself, maybe now's not a good time. They're busy, I'll wait until there's a good time to speak to them. And then you realize that you make that same excuse every single time you want to speak to that person. So now you deliberately go home and you think about it. Today when I made that excuse, or yesterday when I made that excuse, was it valid? Was he actually busy, or was I making excuses? And if you find that you've been making this excuse over and over, and you can verify that you are indeed making an excuse, and your brain is trying its best to stop yourself from facing your fear, speaking to that person, connecting with them, and getting over your tremendous anxiety to speak to them, then the next time you face that same opportunity, you already know that if the thought comes up that now is not a good time, you will instantly snap to consider, maybe I could be making an excuse here. 90% chance what I just said to myself is an excuse. So the next time you get that opportunity, you're able to kind of snap. That thought is redundant. It is a habitual thought, block out. And when you're able to push that thought aside and just move before thinking, move towards that person and start connecting with them, start speaking to them and overcoming your fear, without even thinking about the negative things that could happen. Before your chronic overthinking kicks in, your hands and legs already start moving towards that person because you've already blocked out that thought and now you've started the action. So the chances of you actually taking that opportunity, actually speaking to that person is so much higher because you're able to block out that thought. Now for a while, you just do that with everything you're super afraid of. You build up your resilience, and soon you realize that the resilience applies universally to every situation because you understand that These fears, these habitual thoughts are something that I can actually overcome. As long as I think about it, as long as I'm able to capitalize on the opportunity and put those thoughts aside in that moment, I can do it. Next is your competence. How much do you spend time and effort in investing in yourself? If you're a chronic overthinker, you likely have a shit ton of mistrust with yourself. This could be because of many reasons. You could blame your parents for this. Generally, people will link it back to your parents overreacting when you make a mistake. Because if our leaders, right, we see our parents as kind of our gods as we were growing up, and whatever they said was the ultimatum. And if they subconsciously conveyed the message to you that you are incapable of making good decisions, see, I told you so, how can you make such a stupid mistake? The trust we have in our own decision-making capability diminishes and diminishes. So now we're afraid to do anything that could lead to a mistake. And because of that, we think we have to think in circles repetitively, make sure we fortify our judgment before we go into anything, because making a mistake is terrifying. And we've convinced ourselves that taking action is worse than doing nothing. To rebuild this trust with ourselves, make it make sense. Since you have a perceived lack of competence and shitty judgment and shitty decision-making skills, you gotta force yourself to make decisions when it comes down to it, even the smallest things, and then make the mistake. You're going to realize it is actually ass, because you've actually lacked experience in decision making, and your judgment is in the stinker because you've always relied on your parents. And if it actually is ass, you got to take it to the chin, and then you got to put yourself out there, make more mistakes, keep making mistakes and reevaluate after, so the next day you cannot make that mistake again. Next, you're going to spend your time and capacity to actually build something of your own. Hone some skill, prove to yourself that if you actually try to do something, you can actually make things work. You know, you're as competent as everyone else. You have to prove that to yourself. Even better, prove that you're more capable than other people in certain things. And the only way you can have enough capacity to put in effort and time into the things you care about and develop your competence is to structure your day with good habits. If you're sleeping and eating like shit and you're not working on your physical health, your hormones are going to be in the gutter, your energy levels are going to be dog shit. If you treat yourself like shit, how can you expect to not perform like shit? It's just part of the game, you know. It's like not upgrading your stats in the skill tree and then expecting to beat the game on your third run. Unless you're ridiculously gifted, that's probably not going to happen. And when you have these good habits in check, you remind yourself that you are conscientious, you are trying to do better day by day. You got this, man. If you want things to change, you got to actually try. Like actually. And then you realize that you can actually make significant strides if you actually try. Like you could probably make significant progress in something if you spend a whole day dedicated to it. But you got this. I love you. Good luck. It's a better work.